Good morning. This is an amazing day, not quite expected to be as good as it is. And again, I would repeat, thank you to all of you, our partners, our donors, our staff, all of the funded civic influencers, boots on campuses in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and across the country that makes this story today so powerful. We could not do this without you. And this was a year of heavy lifting because for a lot of people, this is still an off year. And what we are about to show you is why this is not an off year and why the hard work this year pays off and helps us for democracy. But first, to some folks who don't know us and are new to us, I want to share a brief 90-second video so you know a little more about us.
At Civic Influencers, we recognize the passion that young people have on the issues they care about.
Education,
the planet, like sustainability reform,
the Fear the Vote Project,
with democracy under attack right now.
gun violence,
women's reproductive rights.
Can they do in those places that will actually work?
So often the youth is left out of the conversation, and we are the ones with the power and we are the future.
Your work is ultimately about the protection of our democracy.
We are activating young people's civic power through organizing, advocacy, and learning.
Civic Influencers is data-driven. Most organizations and almost every campaign is overlooking the community college, the trade school.
Data is important to me because it forces me to think critically.
Data, the critical tool in the fight against systemic racism in the US.
help marginalized communities connect with our civic engagement efforts.
The work that Civic Influencers does is not just important, it's critical to saving our democracy.
This organization focuses on it all year round. And so I think it's so integral in regards to moving this work forward.
What we do is we recognize that 4 million 17-year-olds become 18 every year. That means a whole generation, for 4 million young people become voters every year. That is our future. And that's why we are doing what we're doing.
Every year, including 2023. And we have helped them show up in the races in 2023. I want to just pause a second. And Susan, I'm directing this at you. There was not a win for the pro-democracy candidate in Mississippi. But look how close Mr. Presley came, a Democrat, to be elected in Mississippi. I say this because we have to rethink how we understand our country and the possibilities for the future. So let's start with Kentucky. Kentucky presented a real challenge. The existing governor, who is a Democrat, opposed Mr. Cameron, who was endorsed by both President Trump and Mr. McConnell. And he won by a larger margin than he did 4 years ago. Young people showed up in tremendous numbers because of the issues, and you'll hear that on the theme for this talk today, on the issues they cared about: abortion access, book banning, student loans, and a lot more. One particular theme that we heard across all of the elections this year, and particularly yesterday, was the concern on the issues. Young people, for the most part, do not turn up to vote for a party. They turn up to vote on the issues. And why that is really important to keep in mind is because old school engagement is done for older generation on loyalty to party, which can be extreme, so that your loyalty to party is over country. Young people are rejecting all these binaries, and that is showing why when they vote on the issues, we are developing a more plural, a more inclusive, and a more equal country. In Ohio, young people were passionate, equally passionate folks, and equally among men and women and other folks. Young people on marijuana issue 2 and abortion issue 1. Both were compelling to them. They were also very concerned about book banning. The beauty of our work in getting granular data of what young people are thinking about across the country is that we understand how they're issue driven and also how they're pretty tepid in responding emotionally to various candidates. Now, the big pivot that civic influencers did in 2021 was to make sure that we were helping young people connect the issues they care about to voting. It was not about partisan, because we are nonpartisan. It was not about getting them to bring any particular party to power. It was about helping them understand how they can prepare for active participation in political and civic life. And we thought, and it's been proven, and it's been proven, and it's been proven, that if they created the demand to vote because they cared about an issue, they would help us fix the barriers to voting. If they had a demand, I need to vote on abortion, I need to vote on LGBTQ equality, I need to vote on gun violence or student loans, right? Then they would have to create the supply. I need ballot boxes. I need polling sites on campus. And by flipping that, you've seen the most remarkable successes this year. And I'll show you some of that. That is just the most thrilling set of discoveries that we have. And before I get into that, it is not just what happened in Ohio, issue 1, abortion rights, which is now part of the Constitution of Ohio, or marijuana, issue 2, or the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, where young people in Pennsylvania were really concerned about abortion access and also about book banning in Pennsylvania. In fact, our staff has been weighing in on the places they live and how important this election was. So, Rachel, you were saying something about Pennsylvania in your high school.
Yeah, Maxim, I'm happy to share. So folks, I live here in Pennsylvania in one of the suburbs of Philadelphia. I was born and raised here, and I moved away for a little bit, but my husband and I just relocated last year back to our hometown here. And over the last few years, we have seen the school board change pretty dramatically. They were, trying to remove certain pieces from the education and what they were going to be teaching students, including not teaching slavery anymore in history classes. And myself, my husband, my group of friends, we all felt this was incredibly dangerous. And so last night, they had a pro-democracy sweep for all open school board seats in the town that I grew up in. So I was really happy to see that. It matters to vote locally because that is who is going to be teaching our children. So I'm celebrating that victory today, Maxim.
You also told me specifically about the school board election.
Yes, and additionally, another school board election. So there have been a lot of big wins that happened in our county. So it was a lot of pro-democracy wins last night. So multiple elections happening, and I voted for a lot on my ticket here locally.
Right, and as you guys know, Philadelphia will be sending the first woman to the mayor's office, and it's an African-American woman. Book banning. Supreme Court elections. Young people are turning out for Supreme Court elections, as in Pennsylvania, as they did in Wisconsin earlier this year. So I'm going to show you yesterday. And you'll see, Kentucky, young people showed up in huge numbers in Kentucky. In both Charlotte and Durham, young people showed up, and both mayors are pro-democracy mayors. Ohio issue 1, which now adds abortion rights to the Constitution, one. Marijuana, issue 2 in Ohio, 1. As Rachel just talked about, in Pennsylvania, first woman and first African-American woman becomes the mayor of Philly. In Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court, the candidate that was pro-abortion access, won that race just as she did. Another woman won in the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The mayor of Texas, that is a runoff between 2 pro-democracy candidates. And the most amazing upset, because of young people, was the state of Virginia. The theory, you remember the red tsunami scare of 2022 that young people diverted? That was supposed to happen in Virginia, where they thought that it would become a trifecta win for the anti-democracy people. That included, by the way, that the threat to abortion rights. In fact, what has happened is pro-democracy candidates expanded their control in the upper chamber in Virginia, and in a surprise flip, won the lower chamber. And so both the entire Senate and lower chamber in Virginia of the Assembly is controlled by pro-democracy people, and Governor Youngkin remains governor. He was not up for election this year. This is not a surprise to us as civic influencers. And let me show you why. We've seen how we are engaging young people on the issues they care about. And then what we also know, if you look at what's been happening, listen to this quote. I voted more along the principle of harm reduction as opposed to being super passionate about any of the candidates. This is a student at the University of Pittsburgh. A lot of the candidates running on both sides were representative of what's currently already represented in the system rather than something new or refreshing. What I found throughout our studies and our conversations of young people across the country is that they're responded with real tepid passion for candidates, whether it's federal candidates or local candidates. But they're extremely passionate about the issues, And so what that teaches me is how much we need to focus on issues. They care about student debt. They care about ending catastrophic climate change. They care about a woman's right to own her own body and not have the government tell her she has to bear a child. They care about LGBTQ equality. And in fact, they care about that so much that they elected, well, let me let Paul tell that story because he was so excited about sharing this with me. Paul.
Yeah, that was a late night text I sent out. Yeah, so, as an out and proud queer person myself, Danica Roem being elected the first out transgender state senator in Virginia is incredibly significant for inclusivity and something my friends and I are still celebrating right now.
And talk about Virginia, thanks, Paul. Elise, who has been doing organizing for a long time in her young life. Elise, where are you?
Here I am. Hi, Maxim. Yes, I am so excited to see the news out of Virginia. For those of you who don't know, Virginia is my home state. I grew up in the northern suburbs and I went to school at William and Mary. And remember, this is a state where extremists have prevented the expansion of Medicaid. And in the last decade, yes, go Tribe. Thanks, Matt. They have proposed extremely onerous anti-abortion laws. This is a really tough phrase, but about a decade ago, Republicans in the state were proposing the transvaginal ultrasound bill that was in Virginia. And Governor Youngkin was promising that if he won majorities last night, he would be the last state to pass new anti-abortion laws. But young people heard him loud and clear and they pushed back. So I saw video last night of my college polling place with a line out the door with students. Probably the highest turnout that I've ever seen at that polling place. And as we all know, the governor was denied those majorities that he wanted in both the House of Delegates and the state Senate.
When I was a
Yes. And Rachel, if you can find that video that Elise, I'm so glad you brought it up, because I think people should actually see the kind of excitement that young people had to vote on the issues and the lines that were created, even in quote unquote an off year like this one, that allowed this dramatic change in Virginia.
Yes, quote unquote, an off year.
Exactly.
I will say, I have one concern, which is that people will see last night's results and just think, great, I don't have to worry about 2024 anymore. No need to invest. I'll just trust it to the young people. They have it handled. And I really want to stress to everyone that is the exact opposite of what our takeaway should be. Young people had this turnout in places like Virginia because we didn't view this as an off year, and because Civic Influencers was there organizing for the last 2 years, prepping for this day. And I want you all to remember that as we move into 2024, there is reason to be hopeful, but only if we're investing in young voters over the next 12 months.
Exactly. Thank you, Elise. And folks, let me show you what Elise is talking about. This is Elise's college. And it went on and on outside the schoolrooms. So we saw that happening in Philly, in Cleveland, in Cincinnati. We saw that happening, as you saw, in various parts in Fairfax County, Virginia, in Alexandria. It is a remarkable, it is so remarkable that people still think of this as an off year. And I want to put one extra piece on what Elise just said. Donations. This didn't happen by magic. I want to thank all of our donors who saw the urgency to fund us this year and to fund us through 2023. It's so important. And of course, we have the presidential election of 2024. So let me make a pitch to you about funding us this year and thanking all the folks who did so. All of these bins, like this, portends well of when you keep young people engaged year-round, month by month. Look at the achievements young people did in 2023. We know that they diverted the red tsunami in 2024. And this was not, by the way, again, it's not about bringing any party to power. This is about them voting on the issues they care about. But this year, you saw the first Black woman, again, from Virginia, sent to Congress in a special election. By the way, in the election yesterday, the first Black speaker in Virginia got elected. He will be the first Black speaker in Virginia. And then they also elected a trans woman to be senator in the South, right? In Virginia. Amazing. But you had Jacksonville, Florida, our work. The most progressive mayor that young people were really passionate about the issues in Chicago. Wisconsin Supreme Court, all about abortion access. Colorado Springs, the mayor. And abortion access on the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania yesterday. We can continue this momentum, but it can't start by parachuting in September of next year. It can't. And now, to add to something Elise said earlier, I don't know if you saw the Harvard Institute of Politics article that appeared in the New York Times a couple of days ago. And I've written a response, and I will share with you what that response is. We are seeing campus fracturing over the carnage that's happening in the Middle East. It is demoralizing a lot of young people who have been working together as a unified group on issues that bring them together, like opposing climate catastrophe, like ending senseless mass shootings and gun violence, embracing our differences and supporting LGBTQIA equality, like caring about student debt and healthcare. And of course, ending the craziness around book banning. And that's fracturing. And the danger to that is that they're not going to show up. And when the margins are so tight and they don't show up, it could cost us our democracy. When the margins are so tight, it could cost us our democracy. And when I talk about tight margins, here's what I mean. In 2020, there were only 4 districts that were won by less than 1% of the vote. There was a district in Iowa that was lost by 6 votes. There was a district in California that was lost by 133 votes. There was a district in New York that was lost by 109 votes. That was only 4. In 2022, the midterms that we just went through, 34 districts were lost by less than 1% of the vote. That should concern us. It should excite us for the opportunity for young people to express their power on the issues they care about. It should concern us if there's campus fracturing and a lack of unity to the young people's movement on the issues they care about, because even a loss of 400 votes, 500 votes, can change the entire direction of our country. And so we are trying to get ahead of that curve right now to make sure we are building and keeping up a cohesive, empathetic movement, even as it shares grief across all sides. We can share grief and still work together. We can share grief for different peoples and still work together. And so we're proposing to bring young people together with folks who have done this before, freedom riders, civil rights activists, Jews and Blacks who work together over a century, not just in civil rights, but since Julius Rosenwald's time. Julius Rosenwald worked with Booker T. Washington 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, to build 14,000 schools, which are the first schools for a lot of Black people across the whole South. In fact, probably all Black people across the whole South. This Jewish philanthropist activist created the first schools that educated Maya Angelou, John Lewis, Medgar Evers. We want to make sure that those memories of how we collaborate across our divides help young people to get through this really fraught moment. And with your help, we can do it. And we can continue this amazing momentum that they have through 2024. Again, focusing on issues they care about and helping them connect that to voting so that they can have an active say in our political and civic life. So I want to welcome our board chair, Liz Ritchie. Liz has been with this organization way before I got here. And her heart is totally in this work. And I wanted to get a chance. I'm putting her on the spot. Because I know Liz lived in Ohio. Ohio is really important and close to Liz. We were founded in Ohio. But to hear from Liz, what of all the things we have done makes you most excited?
Well, thank you, Maxim and the entire staff at Civic Influencers, but also thank you for all the people on the call for supporting us. Your continued support is critical. So we appreciate you joining us today and being part of this great organization. A couple of thoughts. I'll pivot back to, or I'll go back to your comment about the pivot we made just 2 years ago to really be data-driven. This is one of the things that makes this organization so unique. And by understanding the data at a very specific local level, we really can understand what issues matter to our young people. And by targeting areas, we can go in and actually help young people understand how they can get involved and what what the power of their voice can mean. So not only do we get a great outcome in terms of more civic engagement by young people and pro-democracy issues winning the day, but those victories reinforce for them that their voice does matter, that it does count, and that they can make a difference. So that has an exponential impact on their willingness and understanding of needing to be involved and getting their peers involved. And that all starts with being very data-driven and targeted. I think the second thing over this past couple of years is civic influencers is actually being recognized quite broadly by other organizations across the country. We're one of the few organizations doing work in this specific space for young voters year-round. And it's not just at the traditional college, university campuses. This recognition that there are underserved youth communities, whether that's Hispanic facing, trade school, HBCU, that type of thing, community colleges, importantly, the focus there really, again, can have exponential benefits in these close races. And so when we understand where there is an opportunity based on our analysis, we really can go out and reach out and engage those students, those young people, and help them understand their voice matters. If they understand the issues they care about are connected to a voting outcome, we get the kind of results that we want. So great example of that, for instance, here in Ohio, well, I'm in Colorado, but back in Ohio, some of our peer organizations reached out to us for help reaching this target target youth community on making sure people understood what the voter registration dates were, how to register, when early voting started, and how to do that. They knew we would be able to get that message put together in a way that was meaningful. So we prepared a handful of TikToks, sent it over to them, and on top of our own efforts, they were able to distribute that throughout their networks across the state to college campuses. So I think the more we stay focused on our data and our broadening of our youth target audience, the more recognition we get for doing really great things in this space. So my thanks to the staff that I see building depth and expertise over time, and to Maxim, obviously, but also to our supporters. It really is important, and there are no off years.
Thank you, Liz. You gave me so much. I want to underscore what you said. So we reimagined, for example, issues and voting guides. So Liz talked about how we shared with campuses and partners in Ohio and in Pennsylvania and in Virginia, but let me play the Ohio one for everyone here today.
Hey, Ohio voters, it's spooky season. That means we're just 1 month away from a crucial election in your state. We all know there's nothing more scary than your rights being taken away. Your vote could decide if individuals in the state have the right to make and carry out their own reproductive decisions, and if Ohio should become the 24th state to legalize marijuana. And just like in August with issue 1, young voters in Ohio have been flipping elections for pro-democracy issues and candidates. They can do it again this November. But you have to be registered to vote in order to make your voice heard, and the clock is ticking. The voter registration deadline is October 10th. Don't wait until it's too late. If you're 18 or older and have an Ohio driver's license or Ohio identification card number, you can easily register online at the Ohio Secretary of State's website. It's quick and convenient. But what if you don't meet those criteria? No worries. You can still register by printing out the form, filling it out, and dropping it off at your county board of elections. Every vote counts, and we want to make sure that your voice is heard. Think you might already be registered to vote? You can easily verify your registration status on the Ohio Secretary of State's website. If you find out you're registered or need to update your address, you can do it online or get the necessary form. And here's a pro tip. If you registered last year but have since moved, make sure to change your address. Your vote should reflect your current residence. If you plan to mail in your ballot, it must be received by November 7th. So get it in the mail or in a drop box with plenty of time to spare. Ohio, your voice matters, and this upcoming election is your chance to make a difference. So let's get registered and show up to the polls on November 7th, 2023.
Thank you. So we texted everybody, thousands and thousands, right? And in Virginia, by the way, which one of the things that we were able to achieve as with all our partners was that Virginia allows same-day voter registration. Not so for Ohio. And one of the reasons that Virginia accomplished what it did yesterday is that young people who had not even registered turned up yesterday, registered, and were allowed to vote. It takes reimagining, using TikTok to get young people involved and engaged and thinking about the issues they care about and how to vote. We also, by the way, have a lawsuit in Ohio represented by the Elias Group, because did you listen to that? You see how we said it was simple. You see how complicated it is? We have a lawsuit in Ohio against Governor DeWine, who signed the most onerous voter ID law on January 6th of this year, you know, in commemoration of January 6th of 2021, which was the insurrection and attempted coup, which literally makes it so difficult for young people, particularly young people of color and low-income young people at community colleges, trade, and technical schools. And Liz, you may not know this, but I wanted to share this with you. One of the districts in by University of Pittsburgh, which is the Congressional District 17, there are community colleges there. And one young woman who was studying funeral studies, she came out to vote with the trade school students and literally made such a difference in the local elections, and then voted on things she normally would not have voted on for the lower chamber and the Senate. And it was about the issues she was concerned about: book banning and access to abortion, and a lot of this, and including what Rachel talked about, the school board election and book banning in Pennsylvania. Our work with community colleges, trade, technical, and vocational schools is so important. It's so important. In fact, it is mission critical. It is mission critical to be successful now and to be successful in 2024. So let me show you this. This is what excites me about our data. Our data. Margins are so tight. Margins are so tight that our work with community colleges, trade, technical, and vocational schools, and helping young people in those particular districts, because we don't have enough resources to cover the whole country, to cover all the territories. We would love to, but we don't. So we do what we would do anywhere, but specifically where young people can literally see that their votes alone matter. Their single vote can matter. Their marching band can matter. The gospel choir turning out can swing the election on the issues they care about, on the ballot initiative they care about. The sorority and fraternity turning up can change the outcome of a ballot initiative or an election race. We don't do candidate support. We are helping young people who are passionate about an issue realize that through voting, they can achieve their objectives. And so we've identified tight margin races, as you can see in 2024, for the Senate, for the presidential election, and then in North Carolina is the governor's race, similar to what happened in Kentucky this year, right? And you could see how important our demographic is to next year's election. Here's something that many folks don't think about. Between 2016 and 2024, that's an 8-year time period. In each of those years, 4 million young people become eligible to vote. They turn 18. 8 by 4 is 32 million. 32 million people can vote next year who were too young to vote in 2016. Let me add another number. 2.5 million older Americans die every year. 8 by 2.5 is 20 million. So there will be 32 million plus 20 million. 52 million net young people in the electorate. That makes me so incredibly optimistic when it comes to this. These are the 34 House races that young people can have a tremendous impact. And they're all over the country. There's Alaska, Arizona, California, Oregon, Washington State. It is incredible, the potential to help young voters on the issues they care about, to help them connect them to voting. And we can only do that with your help. I hope you're optimistic. I hope you're optimistic about the potential for data-driven work to have an impact and let young people see the power they have. But I want you to hear me also on the concern I have about the fracturing on college campuses. Our students and young people generally all mean well. They really do. They are inartful. They say vile things, hurtful, painful things in a way that your generation maybe, and mine certainly, might have done differently, or never even have done, because we didn't have, when I was in college, I did not have Twitter and Instagram and Threads and X and whatever. And that anonymity of engagement that they have been doing for the last few years, especially on the lockdown, when they weren't even in social community with anyone face to face, have taught them some bad lessons. That the things that you might say anonymously on Twitter, you should never even think about it, much less say it or perform it in person on a campus. But the attacks on each other and the attacks on them, right, threatens to demoralize a whole generation of young people and create divides that none of us would want to see, right? It also sounds to me like you're threatening the whole democracy. So I really would like some pause on attacking young people. They have to grow into this. We have to understand where they're coming from. And I think we can play a real role. We can show how in the history of from abolition through civil rights, Black people and Jewish people have worked together. We can show in the movement for trans and gay inclusivity, people, gay and straight allies of all colors and stripes work together. We can show how Frederick Douglass, from the time he was enslaved and became a freedman, worked with Susan B. Anthony for women's enfranchisement across divides, serious divides, horrible situations. And we can do it again, but it needs our engagement and investment from you to partner with us. And all the partners who are here in this call, I hope you hear me. We can do this together, but we have to model how we work together, and we can do this. All right, so thank you. I thank you, Liz. Now, I know this is time for questions.
Yes, thank you, Maxim. We've got a flurry of questions that just poured in, and I want to be mindful of time. So if we don't get to your question, folks, rest assured we will follow up with you individually after our town hall today, just to continue this critical conversation with you. But Maxim, one big question, I actually got it multiple times from a few different folks. Polls are showing that 2024 will be a rematch between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. What will our strategy be in that?
Okay. Thank you for the question. We do not think about that frame in this organization. We do not think about what is going to help or hurt or promote or not promote Donald Trump or Joe Biden. We are trying to help the next generation of voters become active in political and civic life. We are helping them to understand when they're passionate about the issues, they should vote. They should register and vote. The chips can fall where they are. We choose tight margin areas because for young people, a lot of whom believe my vote doesn't matter, it won't count. That when the voting margin is 3 votes, your dorm room can win, your vote does count. When the state is only won by under 10,000 votes, we're talking Nevada and Georgia, you get the football team and the Black fraternity and you can win that election. That is our focus, not around particular candidates. So please, folks, remember, it's helping young people connect the issues they care about and empowering, equipping them to participate in our political and civic life. not around any candidates. We are nonpartisan and strongly so.
Hey, Maxim, if I can
Yes.
interrupt for a minute, and
Yes.
excuse me, Rachel, one of the other questions though that dovetails with that is a question Rick asked about Movement Voter Project and what's different. And I think Maxim has explained it. I'll reinforce. We're nonpartisan. We're 501c3. We are not supporting individual candidates, but rather the issues. So, Rick, that program or that project is not 501c3, so that they can be more of an advocate for a particular political party. And they can't do the focus we have on campuses, because you cannot go onto a campus and advocate for a particular candidate or an issue on a ballot. It has to be helping educate the young students on campus or wherever we find them, at trade schools, community colleges, and so on, to help them understand the things they care about are manifest in an election, certainly, but it's not about a candidate. So we're very different from them. We would support their efforts, no doubt, for them to go do their mission, but that's how they're different from us. So I hope that answers that question.
Thanks. And so here are some of the interesting things that we talk about when we engage young people. Now, normally folks who do organizing, advocacy, and educational programs in a political context are, in terms of like students, women's studies majors, political science majors, history majors, etc. I'm so proud to say we have accounting majors, STEM students, etc., and business majors. Why do I say that? One of the most important conversations about expanding young people's involvement in these conversations is, how does it work in your context? What are you passionate about? I'm passionate about business and expansion. So Greg, I see you in the audience, right? So here's something that comes up. A decline into authoritarianism or fascism, either way, totalitarianism or fascism, is bad for business. Increasing risk and turmoil and insurrection is bad for business. So if you care about those issues, how do you think you want to vote? How do you think, what kind of system? Is it capitalist? Is it something different that you're envisioning? And then helping you figure out, how do you engage in political and civic life for business, from a business point of view? If you're a scientist and you are thinking about stem cell research, how does that play out in the political space? And so it is sort of an open conversation about how all of us can get involved in political and civic life. And for the first time, I'm so thrilled to let you folks know, we get invited to speak to Wall Street firms on our data-driven work, because they see the value of maintaining a democracy that engages young people and passes it down to the next generation. So Rabbi Jan, who's on our board, hi Jan, I see you in the audience. Rabbi Jan and I had a conversation, and I now use this quote everywhere. Democracy is not a sprint. It's also not a marathon. It is a relay race. We are essential to that relay, because when everyone is cutting civics education from K through 12, we're playing that role, a nonpartisan role, to make sure that this generation and the next is equipped to carry on our democracy as a relay. And thank you, Jan, for that frame, because I think it's such a powerful frame that people forget that if we cut off young people, from our democracy, we'll end the future, not just for this country, but for possibly the entire planet that we live on. And that's what we are trying to do with your help. And between now and December, we have to stop the fracturing on campus. We have to make sure that this generation of young people understand that their role in a democracy and its purpose, and keeping it in perpetuity while improving it, and that they can be passionate and sorrowful and grieving for all the horrors that are happening and still continue to bond over the issues that bring them together, like racial justice, like ending climate catastrophe. And we're doing that, and we're hitting the ground running. I hope that you hear me. We are happy, we're celebrating. You should celebrate with us, our partners. But don't forget what Elise said. A lot of folks thought this was an off year. A lot of folks haven't given yet. We need you to give and to sustain us and other people, our partners who are working in rural communities on rural campuses, like we are. Folks who are working where we are and no one else is. Trade schools, funeral schools, beauty schools, massage schools, welding, electrical, community colleges, whose students are likely to live in that community. And when we get them young, they're likely to be lifetime voters in that community. And then all the other campuses like University of Wisconsin-Madison, etc. Where organizing it is essential for presidential and other races. That careful data-driven targeting and the amazing scientific randomized controlled trial tested interventions that we use, like a polling site on campus, like getting IDs that are voter compliant with student IDs and voter IDs, like getting young people to be poll workers and transportation to the polls, and reimagining TikTok-based voter guides for young people and using texting. All of that is why we are successful, and we're getting the victories this year and that we had last year that will continue only if we can continue to do it and scale it next year to the 2024 election. Rachel, I'm taking long, but I want to make sure I get to everything.
As we reach the top of the hour here, I think we have time for one more question, and you just kind of touched on it. I love this question. Thanks so much for asking it. Do you think that 2024 will be a slam dunk?
I am optimistic that if we are in this together and we model how we come together across our divides, if we can grieve together and come up with unified ways of approaching problems, if we understand how young people are important to our democracy and we invest heavily in that generation, 18 through 28, and that investment should be scaled. That includes an intergenerational conversation with folks who have been battle tested over crises in civil rights, the civil rights movement, people who have been battle tested in the LGBTQ movement and all of the horrors that happen to trans people, folks who've been struggling to make sure we don't live a handmaid's tale life today, like an 18-something statute in Wisconsin that was trying to take women and all of us back to a horrible period of time. If we can bring those generations together and have an intergenerational movement building about the transfer to democracy. And one other thing, it's not a one direction. It's not just older generations, mentoring young people. It's also reverse mentoring, young people mentoring us. How do you communicate? What are your values? You're not binary. You don't want labels like Democrat, Republican, Green Party, Libertarian. You want issues. How do we talk to you? How are you communicating? Is it texting? Is it TikTok? Is it Threads? Is it QQ? Is it Snapchat? How do we do it? So one thing we've started, by the way, Rachel, is that all of those lovely people who have been sending postcards, every election they send postcards to folks in an area to help them get out to vote. We're having them do those postcards on TikTok. Read your postcards on TikTok. And we had our first training yesterday for seniors taking action. Amazing. 4,000 postcards and 4,000 videos speaking to your children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, etc., about why you think it's important and how you love what they're doing and they care about this, but do it on TikTok. That kind of conversation will be a quantum leap forward in winning. So, is it a slam dunk? No, it's never a slam dunk. The margins are too tight for a slam dunk. But our strategy is really smart. It's really smart and it's loving. it's loving, and it's focused on unity. It is about movement building across identities. It's weaving a tapestry for success that is not based on racism, bigotry, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. It's based on coming together and respecting and loving difference. Because what makes us different is our superpower, not our sameness. What makes us different is our superpower, and we embrace that as one intersectional, multiracial movement. If we do that, then we'll win. Slam dunked, I hope. But when I say win, it means young people will embrace our democracy, see voting as essential, as John Lewis said, see voting as the best non-violent way to resolve our differences. Voting means we don't go to war and kill each other over an issue. We vote on it. And young people need to learn that, embrace it, and we and you and all of us together can make that happen. Thank you so much. Liz, thank you. And by the way, Rachel, if you could put everyone on the screen, I want to thank all of our staff. This staff has been punching above its weight. They have been working in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Virginia. They've been mentoring and equipping young people with digital strategies, face-to-face, in-person relational strategies. They have been reimagining issues and voter guides in every state that we are involved in. They have been doing laser targeting. They've been doing randomized control testing. They've been doing data analysis and polling and so many different things that gets us to where we are. And none of this could happen without them. None of this could happen without Audrey Ferguson, who's leading our organizing efforts in Texas and across the country. And Katrina, who's in Baltimore, but also doing work in Virginia and Michigan. And folks like Anna in North Carolina. And all the tech stuff that comes out of Paul and Kathleen. And Izzy, who is our communication, and all those TikTok videos that I showed you, it's the brain work and actual skill set of Izzy. And Elise, who has played so many roles, but has a whole history of organizing, including in Washington State and Virginia. And then our incredible board that stays with us year in and year out, month by month, week by week. We couldn't do this work. We couldn't do this work without the work, the wisdom, and honestly, the collective wealth that makes our program and our country work. So thank you, thanks staff, and of course, Rachel, you're my right hand. Thank you all for everything that we do and for continuing this movement, because we can safeguard our health and our democracy and move us forward. Have a great week, celebrate, and I hope you continue to fund us now and through next year and beyond.